Always good to see you. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much, Tom.
So throughout his career, Biden has kind of been all over the map on China, and to be fair, as have a lot of U.S. officials. But in the 2020 campaign, he pledged to get tough on China. Have we seen any evidence of a stronger U.S. policy from this administration so far, or on this trip so far?
On this trip, he's actually been quite good. But if you look at his administration as a whole, I think China has really enjoyed what it's seen. It did not like President Trump's policies by and large. And they have gotten a number of big advantages from President Biden. And many of them are things that we don't focus on, but which are important from Beijing's perspective. So, for instance, propaganda. When President Biden talks about American xenophobia and American racism, this plays into Beijing's propaganda narratives that go to the heart of its attack on the United States. So these are things that Beijing has really enjoyed. In terms of substantive policy, basically, it has not been get tough on China. This could change, but certainly at not this point.
Gordon, North Korea is saber-rattling again, threatening a missile launch while the president is in the region. How much of that is, first of all, what do you make of that? But then how much of that is Kim Jong-un really acting as a proxy for the communist Chinese?
I think the North Koreans are acting as a proxy because this trip really was billed by the White House as rallying the region on China. And that's an important thing for the administration to do. But what we have done is actually talk more about North Korea because of the possibility, as Phoebe said, of a nuclear test or indeed a launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile, or God forbid, the test of both at the same time. Because remember, the North Koreans have promised an atmospheric test of a thermonuclear device, and they have yet to make good on that warning. So I think that this is really Beijing changing the conversation, acting through Pyongyang.
What would you like to see out of this 6-day visit to the region, including how we improve relations with India, which is also going to be part of that Quad summit this week as well?
Yeah, there are two important things going forward, and they're both in Japan. One of them is the Quad meeting, as Phoebe mentioned. And really what the Biden administration needs to do is to reassure India. India has been squishy on Ukraine for a number of reasons, but one of them was that they were disheartened by the chaotic American withdrawal from Afghanistan. And that delegitimized our friends in the New Delhi security establishment, which by implication meant the Russians gained a lot of influence. Biden needs to reassure them. And that's an important message of this trip overall, because we've got some pretty nervous allies after Afghanistan and after the failure of deterrence in Ukraine. Now, Biden's done some pretty good things in Seoul. One of them is announcing that he is going to increase the military exercises with South Korea. That needed to be done. So things so far are so good, but he's got a lot more work to do because he's got a very important agenda because of his previous mistakes.
You know, a lot of people maybe don't realize that the Indian government purchases a lot more of its military hardware from the Russians than they do from the U.S., and that kind of flipped over time. Do you think that we should be looking to change that? Should we be supplying them with weapons and the latest technology, or at least allowing them to purchase our American military technology as a way of shoring up that alliance?
Oh, absolutely. The one thing that Russia did to get New Delhi's favor was during the Chinese attack and incursions in Ladakh in 2020, the Russians kept on supplying India with weapons on a continual basis. That was really important for India. The United States should be doing that. We should be offering to do that. We should be anticipating India's needs. And unfortunately, no American administration has done that. And the Biden administration has actually done a couple of things to irritate India. And I think that was gratuitous. So we need to stop the gratuitous stuff. We need to anticipate India's needs.
Gordon, multiple polls now have the president's approval ratings at historic lows. How much does that impact his ability to lead on the world stage, in your view? I mean, does he go over to these bilateral and multilateral meetings, and are they aware, or do they approach him as having weakness because of his political situation here?
I don't think world leaders mention it to Biden, but they know about it because, for instance, at a number of these meetings, the conversation, at least in the corridors, was about the weakness of America's leadership, as well as, of course, Biden's low poll numbers. They actually do talk about these things, in fact. So Biden has basically got more to do than normally because he's got to convince people that his administration is capable. As I said, Afghanistan, Ukraine, that has not helped America's position in the world.
Gordon, finally, China is having some social and economic problems right now. Talk to us briefly about those, and do they give us an opportunity to put additional pressure on the Chinese, given the pressures that are, domestic pressures that are going on right now inside the country?
It gives the U.S. incredible leverage because the Chinese economy is contracting. They've got a debt crisis they have no answer to. They need American money and they need access to our markets. And this is one of the areas there I think Biden has given China some favors. So, for instance, this federal thrift plan allowing American federal money, pension money to go into China, really bad move on the part of the administration. So we need to stop that. And if we do, we can actually tell the Chinese what they're going to do because they need us. And if they don't have us, their regime could actually fail. It's quite that bad, at least over the long term.
All right, Gordon Chang, always appreciate you and your insights. Nobody better to talk about China and the Pacific Rim than you. Appreciate you being here, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate it.